Good evening and welcome, everyone. Russia's war with Ukraine is now 24 hours old. The death toll from the fighting stands at 137, with 316 more injured. There are reports that Russian strategic bombers have been activated and are about to target Kyiv.
Invading Russian troops are met with heavy resistance from the Ukrainians. Their military says it has destroyed 30 Russian tanks, 5 planes, and 6 helicopters. But Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he is convinced Putin will try to overthrow the Ukrainian government. Joe Biden today announced a new round of sanctions against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. But even he admits the Kremlin probably won't be fazed by it.
Joining us live from Washington is national correspondent Logan Raddick. Logan, how did Sleepy Joe do in his remarks today?
Well, Jen, President Biden is definitely turning heads during that speech this afternoon, announcing new sanctions while undermining them at the same time. Here,
Sarah Williamson from Kyiv, thank you for joining us and stay safe.
Well, here now to put this all in perspective, let's welcome our panel. Corey Mills, retired U.S. Army, Newsmax.
Well, we don't know, to be honest, so hopefully we won't have too many casualties in Ukraine. Unfortunately, it seems like until you topple the government, Putin's going to do what he can. Long-term enemy, in this case, China. So he took the steps which he did, which was by invading and trying to replace the government.
Corey, Team Biden has completely botched these sanctions. Let's face it, they should have never lifted the Trump-era ones. Today, Biden said no one expected sanctions on Russia to prevent anything from happening, but his administration has been saying the exact opposite for weeks. RNC Research put together a great montage. Let's take a listen.
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening.
These sanctions will do more damage than a Russian bullet, missile, and tank. But many are asking if these sanctions go far enough. Why not specifically target Putin?
Well, again, you're talking about an administration who has demonstrated that they have been weak in every front. They should have gone forward and not have lifted the sanctions on Nord Stream 2. They should have gone forward with looking at decoupling the natural oil and gas away from the EU, things like Germany, things like other areas. But
to buffer against Russia in order to be able to have access to those European markets for businesses. Now, it is possible if you put more sanctions against... Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt really quickly. We have about 30 seconds left, and I want to ask Corey one last question. Do you think Putin rather, has the ability and the money and the finances to recreate the Soviet Union? This is going to be a huge battle and a huge war. Does he have the assets, both financially and militarily, to make this happen?
Well, I think that he does it independently, but I think that we're not, looking at the fact that this is a Russia, China, Iran linkage from a geopolitical system. China needs Eurasia, Africa, and Oceania to recreate the One Belt, One Road initiative, which is to essentially create a maritime Silk Route. Thank you so much.
Well, Russia will have to pay for its aggression toward Ukraine, but so will the American people.
Putin's power grab is going to hit you where it hurts, and that's your wallet and bank account. We may all feel the squeeze for a long time to come. Congressman Michael Burgess joins us next to break it all down.
Exploit this moment to hike their prices, to raise profits.
Once again, the president said that all options are on the table to lower energy prices, but there's still no indication that the United States will increase its domestic energy production under this administration.
Here to discuss how the Russian-Ukrainian war is going to impact your wallet is Congressman Michael Burgess. Congressman, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on. Look, this has been...
You put out a statement. What's that, sir?
I was going to say this whole episode is the result of squandering American energy independence.
Psaki, in the press briefing today, pretty much shot that down, unfortunately, so we'll have to see what happens.
And Congressman, Deputy National Security Advisor Dileep Singh talked about the strength of the sanction package the United States unveiled today. Take a listen.
Today, we impose an unprecedented package of financial sanctions and export restrictions in lockstep with our allies and partners that will isolate Russia from the global financial system, shut down its access to cutting-edge technology.
There's no going back from where Vladimir Putin has taken us.
Congressman Michael Burgess, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, the Ukraine-Russian war is putting even more pressure on Joe Biden ahead of his first State of the Union, which is just days away.
Being heard across Ukraine.
President Zelensky says it's fake news that he has fled Kyiv. He said he remains in the capital with his people. With the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, President Biden and the Democrats must be dreading next week's State of the Union.
Poll after poll show that the American people do not support the policies of this administration and the path that they're on today.
Chad, it's hard to believe, but Democrats, some of the mainstream media, and even a few Republicans are blaming the Trump administration for this war. Utah Senator Mitt Romney is blaming former President Trump's America's first foreign policy, claiming he wasn't thinking ahead. What is your reaction?
Well, I think that's an absurd take. What we saw during the 4 years of the Trump administration was a president who engaged his adversaries. And so whether it was Putin in Russia, Xi in China, North Korea, and the list goes on and on. You don't have to like them, you don't have to agree with them, but as president of the United States, you want to make sure that you are talking to them. And so we haven't seen that from President Biden.
Terry Chad Wolf, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Well, at least 137 civilians are dead following the first day of Russia's unprovoked war with Ukraine.
Dr. Michael Savage is on standby to share his take on Putin's power grab targeting his neighbor.
Have entered the capital city.
Correspondent Sarah Williamson joins us live from Kyiv. Sarah?
A message from a Ukrainian website saying the air defense of Kyiv shot down 2 ballistic missiles.
Sarah?
But we've also heard that there's a plane that's crashed into a neighborhood of Pozniaki. So the information at the moment is just not accurate from anyone. It's too early to tell.
Ukrainian War is the host of the Michael Savage podcast. Dr. Michael Savage. Michael, we are 24 hours into this war now. I want to get your general thoughts on where things stand and Biden's weakness. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts so far in terms of, Russian opposition? Obviously, we know that there are demonstrations going on right now in Moscow, reports of over 7.
It's difficult to explain what is happening in that area without spending about an hour on it. And if I do so, I will sound like an apologist for Putin. And I think people need to understand the history of the region, which goes back at least 1,000 years. And this conflict did not begin 8 years ago. It did not begin 80 years ago. It began 1,000 years ago. The Russians have a very long history in their mind. So Americans, I want to say this, like the underdog, whether it's in a sporting match or in a thing like this. Zelensky facing the tyrant Napoleon.
All right, Dr. Michael Savage, we have to go. We have some breaking news, but as always, a wonderful history lesson. We appreciate you. Have a great night. Thank you, Dr. Michael Savage.
Thanks.
Now we have Sarah back. Sarah Williamson, what are you hearing on the ground in Kyiv?
Well, Jen and Erin, the minute I got off air with you last time and went straight back up to the room in our hotel, we heard 2 extremely loud explosions that just basically rocked the city. These were louder than the ones that we heard earlier this morning when the invasion from Russia really began.
And Putin's war rages on in Ukraine. As we all know, there is a full-scale invasion of Ukraine going on right now.
But don't let that distract from the fact that we are dealing with a liberal takeover of our institutions here at home. The Conservative Political Action Conference, better known as CPAC, sets out to promote conservative here at home so we don't drop the ball on the world stage.
Are concerned and they believe elections have consequences.
So, Matt, you have an all-star lineup, and Jen and I are sorry that we're missing it because we're here in D.C., but we're all excited for Saturday when former President Trump is set to speak that evening. Newsmax will have live coverage and the president's full speech on TV live on Saturday. What do you expect 45 to say, and have you spoken to him recently?
It's been a little bit since I last talked with him. When we get to CPAC time, I kind of duck him a little bit because he's all over me about all the details because that's how his mind works. He seems to really enjoy his CPAC experiences. He's come for over a decade, and I know that he knows that his remarks will matter. It'll be President Trump's first public reaction to what's happening overseas, and is pitch perfect with not just Republicans and conservatives, but a lot of Americans who think it just makes common sense that you should come a legal way.
So, Matt, Democrats obviously continue to sow the seeds of division. CPAC has done the exact opposite. You invited Democrat Tulsi Gabbard to speak at CPAC this year, and she accepted the invitation. Why this decision, and what do you have to say to your critics?
Well, people who know me know that I just couldn't resist setting off this bomb inside the Democratic Party. Their heads exploded when they realized Tulsi Gabbard was going to come to CPAC. They view CPAC as like the center of white rage and hatred, and they just can't believe she's coming. And so it's been so enjoyable to put the game they always play on us with Liz Cheney and others. We played the game on them. And the fact is Tulsi Gabbard is not woke. She's criticizing Hillary Clinton. She's criticizing the radicalism of the Biden administration. We'll get you guys to CPAC in Dallas in August.
Can't wait. Looking forward to it.
Well, with all of the turmoil in the world, Joy Behar, she still managed to make today all about herself.
She truly is the gift that keeps on giving. And this time she's fired up about the war in Ukraine. And you will not believe why. That's next on Prime News.
To hear what is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm scared of what's going to happen in Western Europe, too.
Yeah.
You know, you plan a trip, you want to go there. I want to go to Italy for 4 years. I haven't been able to make it because of the pandemic, and now this.
Oh, boo-hoo. She hasn't been able to make it to Italy because of the pandemic, and now this, the war, it's inconveniencing Joy Behar. Well, Joy, hey, maybe you should have voted for Donald Trump. Maybe if you and your fellow Democrats had voted a different way, we wouldn't be in this problem right now, says Joy Behar, the hypocrite who goes out in New York City with no mask on after saying she's going to wear a mask for the rest of her life.
Exactly. And she's worrying about Italy when we're worrying about empty shelves and pain at the pump. Go to Italy. You're out of touch with the American people completely. And there she is without her mask on, rules for thee and not for me.
Yep, exactly. That's the typical Democrat playbook there. Joy Behar out with her friends in New York City while telling all of us that we have to put our masks on, keep our masks on, because science, that's what you have to do. Well, folks, that is going to do it for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern. Rob Schmidt, he picks up our special coverage of the Russia-Ukraine war.